Okay, so the topic of the class tonight is don't forget to remember. In case you're wondering what that has to do with Parshas Vayikra, I'm not really sure myself, except for the fact that we are also reading Parshas Zohar this week, which is, of course, about remembering Amalek. It also has to do a little bit with Parshas Vayikra, because Rashi says that the reason that there is a paragraph break in the Torah between different little topics, right? Vayikra Moshe, Hashem called Moshe, and he told him about the mitzvah of Karban Oila, and he told him how to bring a sheep as a sacrifice, and then he told him how to bring a goat as a sacrifice, and then many other sacrifices. So Rashi says, why is there a paragraph break in between each of these sections? It's not that it was a separate prophecy and that Hashem called Moshe in for a separate discussion. It was all one big prophecy, according to Rashi. But it's rather that Hashem gave Moshe time to integrate what he learned, to think about it, and clarify it in his mind before he continued. And Rashi says, if this is true about Hashem and Moshe, who was the greatest, wisest person of all time, even greater than King Solomon, and Hashem, who's of course Hashem, so, and obviously the best teacher, how much more so if a regular person is learning from a regular person? How much more so that a teacher has to give his students a chance to integrate and understand what he says before he continues. That's why you have a week's break between every class, so you can review what we're learning. Anyway, so this is connected to the concept of remembering the Torah. Because one of the greatest segulas, a segula is like kind of something you do that has some kind of charm, some kind of power to help you in some way. But one of the greatest segulas, which is a very obvious and self-evident one to remembering the Torah, is to comprehend it and to review it, which is what, of course, Moshe Rabbeinu did. It actually says in the Medrash that when Moshe was up on the mountain, so at first he was learning the Torah, was learning it and forgetting it, until Hashem gave it to him as a gift. But again, we see that he was learning it. He was trying. After he did the best he could, then Hashem, filled him in, gave it to him as a gift. But a person has to put in an effort in terms of Torah study if they want to retain what they've studied. In fact, the concept of retaining what we study in Torah is actually a mitzvah in the Torah. As it says in the Gemara, whoever forgets even one thing that they've learned in the Torah transgresses on a negative command. As it says, Hishamar lecha ushmor nafshecha ma'oid pentishka chasadorim. Guard yourselves and guard your soul very much, lest you forget the things. And that's talking about Sinai. So basically the things that you've learned at Sinai. And the Gemara goes on to say, some say it's 2 negative commands, some say it's 3, and so on. And some of those that count the mitzvahs take this very literally. And they actually count it as a negative command. If I could find it, it would be good. None other than the Smag, the Sefer Mitzvahs Gadol, by Reb Moshe of Kusi, one of the authors of the Tosfos. He writes in his introduction to the negative commands, because he lists all the 248 positive commands and all the 365 negative commands, as opposed to the Sefer Mitzvahs Katan by Rav Yitzchak of Korvil, the small book of mitzvahs. He only writes the mitzvahs that are relevant to today. The Sefer Mitzvahs Gadol, the big book of mitzvahs, writes all of the mitzvahs. So in the big book of mitzvahs, he writes in his introduction, I had a dream. After I finished writing my book, I had a dream and a vision came to me. And I was told you forgot the fundamental thing of not forgetting what Hashem taught you. I was not going to include it in the negative commands. And even the Rambam didn't include it. And when I woke up in the morning, I thought about it, and I realized it's a very important fundamental aspect in fear of Hashem, and I therefore included it. And Hashem knows that I'm not lying about this vision. And I included it in this book so that people should be strengthened in Torah and in rebuke, and so on. So the Smag includes this in the negative commands. Now, many of the other commentaries do not. The Rambam, as we mentioned, and others. That doesn't mean they don't hold that it's a Torah prohibition, but perhaps they simply don't count it as a separate negative command. So, for example, it's suggested that the Rambam considers it a part of the general mitzvah of learning Torah. It's an aspect of the mitzvah of learning Torah. It's how you should learn Torah. You should learn Torah in such a way that you should not forget it. So it's not a separate negative command. And some say, even more so, that we know we don't count general mitzvahs. Some say that this is not counted because it's a general mitzvah. It's such an important mitzvah that it's not counted as a specific mitzvah because it includes like almost everything. Learn and remember so that you'll be able to keep everything. So there's a little bit of a question if this mitzvah applies nowadays, that we have the oral Torah written down. Some say, the Vilna Gaon says that nowadays we can't really transgress on this mitzvah because, so what if we forget it? We can just look it up. And if you forget where to look it up, it's no problem. Just do a search. You'll come up with 25,000 places where it's found, whatever it is. It's not difficult. You'll find out. Big deal. However, the Alter Rebbe disagrees. The Alter Rebbe says the Torah does not change. And just like in the times of the Gemara, if you forgot anything you learned, you transgressed, even though you could go back and ask your Rebbe, and he could remind you. Doesn't make a difference. The Torah says you're not allowed to forget. So the same is true nowadays. Even though you could look it up in a sefer, it doesn't make a difference. The Torah doesn't change. It's still a negative command to forget. Which is why the way the Alter Rebbe trains us to study Torah, or I should say advises us to study Torah in his work, The Laws of Talmud Torah, which is the first part of his Shulchan Aruch that was printed. So the Alter Rebbe says you should learn in such a way that you should always review. Learn and review, and only learn new stuff when you have reviewed sufficiently so that you remember everything you've learned up until that point.
101 times.
There is that concept mentioned in the Gemara, definitely. But he doesn't say specifically 101 times, each person according to their abilities, but learn it till you remember it, and then learn a bit more. And then learn till you remember, and then learn a bit more, and so on and so forth.
What does that mean, remember? Does it mean remember the nuances, or remember the general concepts? Is it the mitzvahs you have to remember? Is it the shaklatari you have to remember? Or is it just halacha?
Honestly, I believe it's the nuances too. I don't think it's just the general concepts.
The more,
Possible.
yeah, but
I'm sorry?
I think
I don't think it's possible.
it's not. The more you learn, the more you realize
it's
that
not
you keep
possible. How
learning.
could you say it's not possible? No, one second. It does say
Yeah.
that lo yalecha malacha ligmar v'le'ata ben chayim le'bata mimena. It's not necessarily possible for every individual to complete learning the whole Torah. Not everybody has that kind of mind. But v'le'ata ben chayim le'bata mimena doesn't mean you can say, well, I'm not going to finish it anyway, and I'm not going to start. Do the best you can, and that's it. If you don't finish the whole Torah.
But if you go over to any rabbi, the greatest rabbi in the world, and you ask them a question, the Gemara says that Rav Meir and Rav Nassim plant ask a question themselves, Why? Because he didn't learn Masechtas Luxin in a long time.
Right.
So what does that mean? That means he had to refresh his memory in that area. He knew the general concepts, but even the Nasi at the time didn't know Masechtas Luxin so well.
Right. It wasn't fresh.
Yeah.
Wasn't fresh.
Which means that even though I'm sure he remembered the general concepts, but he didn't remember the nuances, and that's why they tried to ask him questions there where he wouldn't know.
Right. Right. Well, maybe that was in his list of things to review, but he hadn't gotten to it, and so on. So maybe you're allowed to.
Well, could we say that I don't know, the Nasi was Leo?
Leo, I think so. Yeah.
He didn't keep this mitzvah. Or I'm learning from this that it's impossible to keep the mitzvah if you learn the nuances.
I don't know. I honestly don't know. What I do know is that Reb Zalman Nechemia Goldberg has advice for those that want to try to keep this mitzvah.
Really?
Yes. He writes it in his introduction to one of his farm. So what he says is, basically, you review after you've learned something once. You review it the next day with the nuances, and then the next day with the nuances again, and then the next day again. But as you review it more and more, it goes faster and faster. You can think it over much, much faster because you've reviewed it again. You can just, every concept, you can just think about the concept, and that, like in your mind, you get the picture of it. You know what I mean? Because it's become so clear to you over all the review that the review takes much shorter. That's what he recommends. If you review constantly, then the review takes much shorter to do.
But there will come a point that you won't be able to learn anymore.
I don't think so.
No,
you can always learn more.
No. He has a point. If you're reviewing
everything you learned, even after.
No, not every day. Not every day.
Every week, let's say.
Every week, or in the Gemara it says every 30 days.
Okay.
Rav Yehuda used to review his learning every 30 days, which some say means literally all of his learning. And some say everything new that he learned within that 30 days, he would go stop and review before he continued.
But there's going to come a point that you can't review more than a certain amount in 30 days. Unless, I mean, even a person who doesn't work. Well, I'm saying for sure a person who works, but even a person who doesn't work, there's going to come a point when you've learned so much that you can't review in 30 days.
That's true, but this brings to mind a Gemara in Eruvin, which says as follows. Because it sounds like it's so terrible, I'm not going to learn anything new, but really the Gemara in Eruvin says, on the contrary, if you think you're learning something new, you're not being honest. Here's what it says. I don't have the Hebrew in front of me. Let me just get the Hebrew 1 second.
What's that?
Nun Dalet Amud Beis in Eruvin. So here it is. Hoin mehevel yemait, v'koivetz al yad yarbe. Wealth that is vain will be minimized. But a person who gathers al yad in his hand, a small amount, yarbe, he'll get a lot. So what does it mean, the Gemara says? That means that if a person gets mounds and mounds of Torah, I learned this and I learned that and I learned and I have this micha and that's micha. He's gonna mismight. His Torah is gonna get minimized because he can't retain it all. So what did he gain? Ve'im lav kovetz al yad yarbe. If he takes a small amount, yarbe, he'll get big. Meaning to say, it's slow, steady, but surely he wins the war. He says, they say. So he has smaller amounts, but he has it, and eventually he'll grow it.
So a person who learns Torah properly, you're saying, would be clear in everything they learned with all the nuances at any time? I mean, there's halachas that you shouldn't ask your teacher questions in something you're not learning then, no?
That's true.
So that's
because it might embarrass him.
Not learning properly?
It might embarrass him. I'm not sure.
This concept.
Not sure about the nuances. The Alter Rebbe may discuss it in Hilchos Talmud Torah. He has a lot of auras, a lot of contras achros there. Not sure.
This concept of not forgetting is not related to the reading of the Torah by heart. When reciting the Torah by heart, when the times of the Beit HaMikdash, the Israelites, the Kohanim, they should know by heart to do the Mamadot and.
So In general, the written Torah is something we do not have to know by heart. On the contrary, we can know it by heart, but you're not supposed to recite it by heart, because you're supposed to read it from the book, and every letter, some missing words, missing letters, different spellings, and therefore you're supposed to learn it from the book to get all those nuances. It's the oral Torah that you're supposed to try to know by heart as much as possible.
Okay.
Okay, so based on this concept, on this mitzvah of retaining the Torah, so I'm going to share with you some of the methods to retain learning. And I gathered these from a very important sefer called Shmiras Hagufa HaNefesh. He did a wonderful job in gathering a lot of information together. Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Lerner, printed in 1988. Okay, so the first thing that is, of course, an important segula for learning, for retaining your learning, as we said, is to comprehend it and review it. So, as far as comprehension is concerned, the Gemara says, in Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud says, whoever understands their learning will not easily forget it. As it says, Pentishka chasadvorim asher ro'u einecha, lest you forget the things that you've seen with your eyes. Seeing with your eyes is an expression for clear understanding. Eyes in this context is the eye of your mind, your mind's eye. If you see something clearly, then you won't forget it. And I remember a story that Rav Chaim Shalom Deitch, my Rosh Kollel from Yerushalayim, shared with me once. He said when the Rebbe came out, I forget what year it was, with the concept of getting smicha, so the Kollel learned smicha. In general, before the Rebbe said that, it wasn't the thing to get smicha. If you wanted to be a rabbi, you got smicha, but if you weren't planning to have a shul, you didn't need to get smicha. But the Rebbe said, so they did a smicha track. Anyway, but they learned it like be'iyun, they learned it in depth. And at one point, they went to the shlachtos, they went to the slaughterhouse, outside of Yerushalayim somewhere. And, they were getting some shimush, getting some on-the-job training from whoever the Rav was of that shlachtos. Anyway, a certain shaila came to them, or came to the Rav, a certain question came with an animal, whatever it was, liver, lungs, kidney, who knows what. Anyway, the Rav paskined it's kosher. And they had been learning these concepts in depth, and they argued with him. And they said, well, based on this and that and the other, should be treif. So he said, listen, I understand it. I hear what you're saying. However, there's a certain sefer, and it was a difficult sefer to find. It wasn't a well-known sefer, but this Rav obviously knew it, had learned that he knew it. Certain sefer has this exact question, and he paskins that it's kosher. So what are they going to say? They're not going to argue on this important sefer. Nothing to say. Anyway, but they were bothered by it. They tracked down the sefer. If it was maybe in the university library, Hebrew University, I don't know where they tracked it down. They tracked it down. This is before they had it all on computer. They tracked it down, and he was right. That sefer discussed the exact question. He made one small mistake. Instead of the sefer saying kosher, it said treif. That's all, just one word. Just got one. Everything else was right. Just got one word wrong. So if he had learned it in depth with the understanding, he probably wouldn't have forgotten it. He learned it and he read it, but I mean, I'm not judging it, but I'm saying that's what the Yerushalmi means. If you learn something in depth and you understand it properly, you're less likely to forget. The same thing goes as far as reviewing knowledge. And here's a few sources that speak about the importance of reviewing. Ashrei Adam Mefached Tamid Umaksha Libo Yipol Bara. pasuk in Mishlei, Proverbs. Lucky is a man who is always afraid, but a person who hardens his heart will fall in a bad way. So the simple meaning of the pasuk is, you have to prepare for all eventualities. If you're worried and you're nervous and you prepare, then you'll be good. But if you say, it's going to be fine, nothing's going to happen, then you may end up in trouble. And this is true also in terms of sins. A person who's afraid of punishment, it's a good thing to be afraid of punishment. A person who says, nothing will ever happen to me, Hashem will forgive, blah, blah, blah. In the end, he could end up in a bad way. But the Gemara in Brachas says this is referring to Torah study. Lucky is a person who is always afraid that he's going to forget. And therefore he reviews because he's afraid he's going to forget. He feels like he is a forgetful person. It's good to think you're forgetful because then you'll be forced to review. Whereas if you think, I'm okay, I have a good memory, so you don't review, then you may end up actually forgetting. Okay, the Gemara in Eruvin says, and this is based on the pasuk Luchos Even that we read not long ago in Chumash Shemos, describing the tablets, the Luchos. They are called Luchos Even, stone tablets. So the Gemara has a play on the words. The word Luchos is similar to Lechoyayim, to cheeks. The Gemara says a person has to make his cheeks like stones. He has to tire them out. He has to wear them out with his constant review of his studies. If he does, he will remember his studies. If not, he will forget.
Does that mean the review has to be verbal?
I was just going to say.
Oh, we're going to get to that. Absolutely. Absolutely. The learning and the review has to be verbal. And that's a famous story with Bruria. Bruria, the wife of Rabbi Meir, the daughter of Chanina ben Tradian, thank you, once came into the Beis Medrash or whatever it was, and she saw somebody learning quietly, and she told him off. And she said, Arucha hi umishtameres. If the Torah is drawn out in all of the limbs of a person, then it will be remembered. But if not, it will be forgotten. And in a similar way, I think it was Rabbi Yehuda said to his son, gotta find it. No, Shmuel said to Rabbi Yehuda, Shinana, wise one, open your mouth and read, so that you'll remember the Torah and live. Because the Torah says, Ki chayim heim lemoitzaehem. The Torah is life for those that bring it out. Lemoitzaehem bepet, to those that say it with their mouths. If you study just reading with your eyes, it's not going to work. Not only that, the Alter Rebbe says, if you study something that you could be saying with your lips and you don't, meaning to say there might be some things that you can't say with your lips because you're doing some in-depth thinking. You're trying to focus and get to the bottom of the matter, and you really have to think. It's not a time to be muttering.
It also depends on the circumstance. I mean, I learned verbalizing, but if I'm on an airplane, then
if you don't want them to look at you funny, that's true. So
I mean, I'll still verbalize it, but
not loud.
No noise is coming
right.
out.
No singing.
But you're right. But there is a conditioned feeling that I always have that when I'm learning, my lips have to be
good, very good. So the point is, Alter Rebbe says, if you learn quietly when you could be moving your lips and saying it out loud, you actually have not fulfilled the mitzvah of Torah study. So it's not that you didn't do the best mitzvah, you didn't do the mitzvah. So it's a very severe thing. The point is that the Torah is considered like something that is ephemeral, that it's not really part of this world. It's really like a spiritual entity. So to really bring it down into yourself, you have to work on it. You have to bring it down. You can't just think you're just going to hold on to it a little bit. You have to really grasp it. So that's why you have to bring it into yourself. So, in a similar way, speaking of the Torah being ephemeral, the pasuk says, "Hisif einecha boy ve'einenu." Should you blink your eyes at it, it is not here. Again, another pasuk in Mishlei, and this is speaking about Torah, according to the Gemara. Back to the Gemara in Eruvin, a person who this is Megillah. Person, who stops learning Torah even for a short time, like the blink of an eye, so to speak, can forget their learning.
It also says in Megillah,
Yeah.
someone who thinks that they're learning and not comprehending is wrong also. If someone tells you that they've learned but they don't really understand what they learned, I'm going to say, I think it's
You mean?
yeah. Don't believe him.
Yeah, don't believe that he's really toiled. If he would have toiled,
Vice
he would
versa.
have.
It also says vice versa. A person who thinks that they didn't get anything out of the learning, don't believe him either.
Exactly. Then it means he didn't really work at it. If he would have worked, he would have gotten it. So the Gemara says that a person, and this is also based on a pasuk in Mishlei. So a person, a fellow who's hunting birds. So if you don't make sure you secure the birds that you catch, so as you catch new ones, the old ones fly away. The way to make sure that you'll keep the old ones is to break their wings. Break their wings. Don't make. I mean, you could also tie them. That's another idea. Depends how.
You're not going to eat that. That's the way to break their wings, and it shouldn't be.
Yeah, I think it's only the part of the wing that could puncture the lung. The wing itself doesn't make a treif. It's the part of the wing that could then puncture the lung. So the point is that a person who studies Torah but doesn't make sure to remember it is like a hunter who hunts, and as he gathers more, the other ones fly away. So the point is a person has to review in order to make sure he remembers. So the Medrash tells the following story. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai had a student that would forget his learning. Once the student was so upset that he had forgotten his learning that he was walking and crying in the graveyard. It's not clear in the Medrash what he was doing in the graveyard. Had Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai passed away? Was he going to daven by him? It's not clear how the graveyard fits into the story, but that's what it says. Anyway, he went to sleep, and he had a dream.
In the graveyard?
It doesn't say. Sleeping in a graveyard is a sign of being a shoita, according to the Gemara. So we'll assume he didn't sleep in the graveyard. Anyway, it says that he had a dream while he was asleep. And in his dream, he heard a voice. And the voice said, "If you throw 3 stones at me, I will come." Anyway, he woke up and he went to the local dream interpreter. And the dream interpreter says, very simple. Everything you learn, you have to review 3 times. And then you'll remember it. And that's what he did. And that's what happened. So when I was growing up, they said 4 times. Because at the top of every Gemara, there's 4 lines of Rashi and 4 lines of Tosfos. And they said, why 4? It's to remind you to review everything 4 times. But I actually did not come across that number.
But the 3 times include the first time you're learning it?
So that's what I was thinking. When I was learning this, I was thinking maybe it means 1 plus 3, but it doesn't say that. It just says to learn it 3 times. It doesn't say to review it 3 times. So it sounds like it means a total of 3. But speaking of learning a number of times, we find in the Gemara, I think according to the Maseres HaShas, it's 5 times in the Gemara, it says about people who learn something 40 times. They learned it 40 times until it was in their pocket. They learned it to the extent that it was like they had it in their pocket. So like we said, that's how they used to learn in the olden days. They didn't have Gemaras, they didn't have anything printed. You learned it until you knew it 100%. And I looked up some of the places, and it's interesting that oftentimes what they were reviewing, you would think, because you were asking about the nuances, when you would think it wasn't so essential to review it 40 times for that nuance. I mean, it's just a nuance. Yet they did it. So, for example, the Gemara in Bracha says that Rab Zera, when he was tired out from his learning, because he would learn, with great intensity, and he was, he was tired, the strain and the stress of learning. So he wanted to take it easy a little bit. So how do you take it easy? He would go in front of the Beis Medrash, and he would stand whenever the Talmid Chachamim walked by. It's good exercise. And it's a mitzvah. Every time he stood, he got a mitzvah. So that was his vacation. Anyway, so Rav Zera was sitting in front of the Beis Medrash, and Rav Nosson Bar Toivi, who was the head of the Beis Medrash, came out. And he asked him what they learned. Presumably he stood up or whatever. He asked him, what did they learn? So he said, we learned that the halacha is not like Rav Yehuda, who says you must always daven musaf before mincha, but rather you can daven mincha before musaf. Very limited circumstances, but there's some cases when you can daven mincha before musaf. Okay. So he was so excited, and he learned it from him 40 times. So it was the name of Rabbi Yochanan that he said it. So Rav Nosson said to Rabbi Zera, what are you so excited about? Is it the first time you heard something, the name of Rabbi Yochanan? Is that why you're so excited? He said, no. It's that I used to learn this same thing in the name of Rabbi Shua ben Levi, and now I know it's the name of Rabbi Yochanan. So to remember that it was from Rabbi Yochanan, he reviewed it 40 times. He already knew it. He just had to change the detail of who it was from, which you would think, big deal, it's that. No. This is, by the way, a clear thing in the Gemara, that you have to know who said what. Because if you don't know who said what, then you can't ask any contradictions between anything. Because who knows who said it and what their opinion is about the other thing. If you ever want to ask and compare, you have to know who said what. So how could he say that if he says this elsewhere, if he holds this, blah, 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 blah. So it's an important aspect, but it's still a detail. Nevertheless, he bothered to learn it 40 times. In the Gemara in Pesachim, it says that Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef learned the interpretation of a Mishnah from Rav Avahu when Rav Avahu was in a large group of people. Why does the Gemara say he learned it when he was in a large group of people? So it would seem to me, perhaps, that he wasn't embarrassed. The fact that there were other people there and he had to make him repeat it 40 times didn't bother him. He had to learn it. Lo yabaysh and lamed. A person who is bashful will not learn, and he did it anyway. So the Gemara in Megillah says,
what does that mean to review it 30 times?
40
times. Does that mean to just read it 40 times, or does that mean to try to learn something new each one of the times? Or just to verbalize the same thing, like just sitting there and reading the same words?
No, the thing is, it's not that he reviewed it privately 40 times.
Yeah.
Tana minei arbain zimna.
So
he learned it from the teacher 40 times. So it's like my Yisrael, my 2-year-old. Yeah. When he hears something he doesn't quite get, he says, say it again. Say it again. Say it. Well, however many times he'll make me say it again. So that's what it is. That's what it seems. I mean, I don't know. I guess the teachers didn't get bored. They were very patient. But that's what it seems.
Well, who was it that...
Rav Preda did 400 times.
How much? 400?
400. But then he had to do 800 one time because the student forgot.
But that's because the student didn't know it, didn't understand it. Not because he wanted to remember it. At least I don't think it didn't seem like it.
It
seemed like
he said he just couldn't get it.
He just couldn't get it.
Maybe that's what it was. No, but he had to learn everything 400 times.
Yeah, that's right. It was everything again.
Yeah. Everything. Maybe it was till he remembered it. I think it was till he remembered it.
Then he did Chazara 40 times.
He did his own Chazara, but from his teacher he had to learn it 400 times. So
the Gemara has all over the place. We discussed nuances before. Whenever there are questions, the Gemara has mnemonics to remember them.
Yes.
Is that how what they used to do in the Chazar?
Absolutely,
Oh,
absolutely.
that's what it.
That's another Gemara in here. Asay Simonim La Torah. B'nei Yehuda the Daigi Lishni umisnachilu Simona Neskay Materasan B'Yoda. The B'nei Yehuda, they would make a simon for themselves, and they were very precise in it. They remembered things. The B'nei Golol didn't, and they would forget things. Ein haTorah nikas ela b'simonim shenamar sima b'fi, and put it in their mouths. And the word sima, similar to simon, give them a simon, teach with a simon. And the point is that he brings here that the Shalah was not happy when people who were learning Gemara would skip on the simon. And the Gemara, it says a simon for the next few discussions is ba 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 ba, these words that seem totally random. And the Shalah would insist that people should learn those words because he said there's deep secrets.
Remember the words also.
I don't know.
Wait, was that like in our Beit Safim with all the acronyms for the different Havdalah opinions, Yaknes?
Yeah. Well, that's clear that's very helpful to remember. Otherwise, how are you going to remember any of it?
But that's for halacha. This is different. This is whenever there's like
there's different opinions. They'll say this. And
Well,
the Gemara has questions.
exactly.
On the opinion.
Very
Questions
often
and
it's
answers.
questions on the opinions back and forth, so they'll give you a sign to remember the order of the questions and whatnot. Which you could say, what's the difference? I mean, as long as we remember the halacha. No,
And that was
the
Rabbi
back
and
and forth is
Ravashi
also-
that created those, or were they from before?
I'm not actually sure. I don't know who did those. The editor. I don't know.
Jewish press.
So, speaking of the numbers, how many times to learn something? So it says in the Gemara, "Eina doima misha shoyna pirkai mea pamim misha shoyna pirkai mea pamim v'echad." It's not the same. A person who is learning 100 times or 101 times, and the reason for this is, besides the fact, Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, if you learn 101 is one time more. The class is next one. One time more than the normal way of learning in those days.
Also Micha.
Exactly. Whereas 100 is what? Samach Mem. 100 is the name of an angel that's in charge of forgetting. Samach Mem, not a very good angel. 101 is the angel of Mecha, which is a very positive angel. So that's part of it. Okay, a few more good segulas here, and these ones that I'm saying now they're not like segulas that we don't understand, like eating olive oil or whatever. These are ones that make 100% sense. So the Gemara in Megillah says a person who learns without singing, about him the pasuk says, "V'gam ani nasati lachem chukim lo tovim mishpatim lo yichyu b'hem." I've given them rules that are not good and mitzvahs they will not live with. Meaning to say, if a person doesn't sing when he's learning, he's not happy about it, so it's like a drag to him.
I thought the singing was about trying to remember it in a song.
Exactly. That's also part of it.
Because
If
they
you
didn't have
sing
written
it,
down.
if you
That's
sing
what
it,
boys
it'll help
always
you
do
remember.
with that.
Exactly. If you sing it, it'll help you remember. To this day, when I have to remember the books of the Tanakh, I remember in 7th grade, the Rebbe came and he taught us how to sing it, and that's it. So the point is, but it also means that you're enjoying it. It's a pleasure, and it's not a drag. Because if it's a drag, then the Torah doesn't stay with the person who doesn't care for it, doesn't give it respect. And with this, I will mention the name of a friend of mine who has passed away. Trying to remember his name. No. What's his name? Schnitzler, Heshi's father. You know who I mean?
I know, actually, I don't know.
Heshi's father used to come in the winter here and there. A very geschmacka guy. He passed away a couple of years ago. Anyway, so he said that, in the Gemara very often it says that there's words missing in the Mishnah. Chasuri mechsera v'achi katani. The Mishnah is missing words, and this is what it should say. mean the Mishnah is missing words? So put it in. The person who wrote it the first time forgot. Fix it up. So he said the pshat is that they would sing the Mishnayos, and sometimes there were words that didn't fit into the song. They left it out, and they expected you to remember it.
Sometimes it's very much so changes the halacha.
Nevertheless, you were supposed to remember it. It's not that it wasn't part of the Mishnah. It was part of the Mishnah, but didn't fit into the song. So they would.
So you weren't remembering the Mishnah for its entire detailed text. You were remembering it for context.
You're remembering the main words,
the song,
and then you would think about the rest of it. It's not that you didn't know the rest of it. You knew it, but this was the way it went better. So that was the text that actually made it in. Interesting. So
one of the other things that I notice in the Gemara is when they get to a point and then they say, you know what, let's just reverse the opinions, then it'll make sense. That's the part that always bothered me. Is that something possibly similar?
that I don't know.
But it's just like,
That seems like a mistake. That seems like a mistake.
but that happens. They're like, no,
Yeah.
we've hit a wall. You know what? It must be that it's exactly the opposite. Let's just reverse them, then it's
Yeah,
gonna make sense.
that's what it seems. It seems like that Tana made a mistake. The author of that Mishnah or Brisa made a mistake. That's what it seems. I don't know.
You know? Yeah. People. Just people.
Okay, another way to remember something is to be machadish chidushim, to come up with new interpretations, because when you say something new, that's interesting. You remember it. If it's something, it's in the book, it's not so exciting. It's there already. It's been there for thousands of years. So you don't give it so much attention. But if you come up with a new pshat, I still remember to this day the first chiddush that I came up with in yeshiva. You know, a little ha'ara, and the ha'ara said,
Give it over.
little thing. It's a very simple thing, but it says in halachas of being maver sedra that if you have a pasuk that has no targum onkelos, then you should say the chumash 3 times. That's what it says. It's in the Gemara, I think. Anyway, if you open up a chumash now, there is no pasuk that has no targum onkelos. So the pshat is very simple. Any pasuk that is the same in the chumash and in the targum onkelos has no targum onkelos. They just put in the words of the chumash into the targum onkelos because when you're being maver sedra, it should be there for you. But it's not really targum onkelos. It's really chumash. So what's the practical difference if it's targum onkelos or chumash? The answer is that al pi Kabbalah, you are not supposed to say trup when you do targum onkelos. The targum onkelos, whatever kabbalistically, you're not supposed to sing it. You're supposed to say it. So when you're being maver sedra and you come to the psukim, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zvulun, Naphtali, the Papa, the third time you say without trup. That's my chiddush. Anyway, so the Chassam Sofer has a nice word. The Chassam Sofer says, there's a new minhag that people have. Everybody's looking for a chiddush. Everybody wants to build something. This one has one here, this one has there.
That was before the internet.
So it could be to find some kind of basis for this, that the earlier sages saw that people were forgetting things, and there was no way to help them remember. But by the fact that they were making new chidushim on every page, that's how they would remember. And this is something that is borne out in truth, and I know it about myself. So even if it's not such a true chiddush, at least he remembers. He remembers, in other words, the sugi. He remembers through that chiddush, he remembers the sugi. So. Okay, we already mentioned the concept of making simonim. And also the Gemara in Pesachim says that a teacher should teach a student b'derech ketzara. He should teach the lesson in short words so that the student will be able to retain it. If you give him information overload too much, he's not going to retain it. So give it over in a short form. Okay. Another thing the Gemara says is to minimize the pursuit of pleasures. if you think you're going to live it up and enjoy life, you'll have good parties, you'll have the best steaks and sushis and whatnot, and you'll also learn Torah. It doesn't work. The Gemara says, if a person acts like an animal that just kills the animal that he wants to eat and he eats it, doesn't look around for a chef to cook it and for the best spices and whatnot and the food trucks and whatever. Nah, whatever, he just eats it, doesn't pay attention. So the same thing, a person has to just, whatever it is, when it comes to physical stuff, whatever it is. And then he can focus properly in his learning. If he's too focused on the physical pleasures, it's going to distract him.
But that's not, I mean, that's pleasures which are totally unnecessary. Because, I mean, the Gemara says that people will learn better after eating meat, let's say, Forget the Torah or something.
Right.
So I guess, I guess there's a certain amount of physical, like, a certain amount of things that you should take. I mean, you should take care of yourself. And,
right.
And make
I
sure.
don't understand.
No, the Gemara says that I think it was Rava that said that until he ate meat in the morning, he didn't have a clear mind. So, like coffee, for some people. So we see there are some things that are important, but nevertheless, I think the point of the Gemara is, if pleasures become a priority, they will certainly be a distraction. If you have them and you can get them easily, by all means. But if you start focusing on them, then it's
you should balance so that they increase your learning.
Exactly.
Like for bringing, right? I mean,
that's about inspiration. That's not about food. That's about.
But isn't it also about the food and all that enhancing the learning aspect also?
I don't think so. Food is just to get you to come. But once you're there, you don't have to eat. The main thing is the Divrei Torah.
I'm not wrong in the Ketubot.
I'm sorry?
In Maseh Ketubot, they say that you cannot eat, you should not eat dates before learning the Gemara because you're not...
it's like it can make you drunk.
Yeah,
that's true. Okay, here's something really, really interesting from a student of the Trumas Adeshan, Sefer Leket Yosher. I remember, he says, the rich Bahram, they had a table which was like a lazy Susan. You have in your spice things, you have a lazy Susan. It's like a plate.
Come to them.
So they had this big lazy Susan.
The Sefer would come to them.
And the Sefer, they had all this farm on the table. They would just spin it around and bring the Sefer to them. He said it's no good because when you get up and find the Sefer, you remember it. If you just, it's too easy. You're not going to remember it. So that's what he would say. He would say, if you have it on the shelf, don't be lazy. Get up and get it. If you don't have it, that's what the computer is good for. But if you have it, get it. So
they didn't bring it back.
Well, they have a computer now, so much easier.
We know, of course, that a person should try to learn when he's young, because the Mishnah in Avos says that what you learn when you're young is like what's written on a clean paper. That's why a person should use out his young years to learn as much as he can, so that the learning should go into his heart, and then he'll remember it better. A person, to make sure he remembers, should teach other people. In the schus that you'll teach other people, then it'll stay with you. The Medrash says, by teaching it to others, that strengthens it in yourself. And the Sefer HaMidos says, I don't know who that is, a person who does not have a good memory should be involved in kiruv. Yachzir b'nei adam b'tshuva. He doesn't say that as a school to help his memory. He just said, okay, you can't learn. At least,
Those who
at
can't-
least help
those who
people do
can't bring
tshuva.
in to learn.
So now here's an amazing thing.
Doing more of this.
Here's
There's
an
more
ama-
l'chaim's involved in Kira. That's not helping their learning.
here's an amazing thing, my friends. You know, there's so much crazy stuff out there in the world that, just stuff that's like empty, like nothing to it on the internet, surfing, reading articles, whatever. So you think, I'm not in the mood of learning anyway. Okay, so I'll read about this, that, and the other. So here's what it says in the Medrash Rabbah. A person who fills his head with empty things, he's going to forget the Torah. It's like oil. The oil has to be pure. Even one drop of something else can ruin the oil. And here's a story from the Sefer Chassidim. The Sefer Chassidim, Rabbi Yehuda Chassid, was asked by a student of his about eating foods that make you forgetful. There's some foods that make you forgetful, like olives, right? So he said, don't talk to me about eating these foods. That's not what's important. I see that you're not learning, you're wasting time, you're going and speaking to the Amei Ha'aretz, you're listening to their idle chatter. Better eat all of those foods as long as you don't talk all of that idle chatter. You're filling your head with their stories, and that's why you're forgetting. It's not about the foods. So that's an important thing.
What is considered idle?
CNN. The internet.
Politics considered
Probably.
I mean, I think so.
to what extent?
I mean, the night before the election, you find out what to do. For a year before, you have to know what this one said and that one said. And
And what about science, nature?
that could be helpful. I mean, both in terms
It's
of
educational.
understanding the greatness of Hashem in this world, and in terms of knowing how to live. It can help you in your lifestyle.
Sports.
Sports.
No, I'm
is-
serious. It's like it's yeshiva. That's the
Sport, playing. Sorry.
Playing.
Playing
Yeah,
sports is
playing,
okay.
okay.
Following
Following
sports,
sports.
that's the biggest worm potato.
That's the main example.
Yes. But here's a good one. That a person who is shori beloy isha, the Gemara says, a person who is without a wife is without Torah. Why? Very simple, Rashi says. Because he's so busy washing his own socks and making his own suppers. When does he have time to learn? He has a wife, she takes care of all those physical things, and then he can have time to learn. This was before women's lib. All right, my
That's the
friends.
Second comment this week. Remember the one earlier about hitting.
3,000 years ago.
The Mishnah Pirkei Avos says that the Isser of Mischayev and Afsha is only actually Yeshiv Yisur and Miliba.
Yes.
Is that the Lav or it's just the Chiyuv Misa?
Yeshiv Yisir Meliba means that he through not reviewing, as opposed to Takfal of Mishnaseh when it was too difficult in the first place. Takfal of Mishnaseh doesn't mean that he just forgot.
It means that you pushed it away.
No, it means through not reviewing. Yeshiv, you sit around and do nothing. Takfal of Mishnaseh,
Using Yisur and Miliba means is active?
no. I mean, I didn't learn all the Mefarshim, but that's how the Alter Rebbe learned Pshat, definitely. That it means that you forget them through not doing anything. Takal Mishnasa means it was too difficult in the first place, and like we said before, something you don't remember, something you never understood properly, it's hard to remember. That you don't get punished for. But things that you could have remembered and could have reviewed and didn't, that's what he's talking about.
Is that how they translate it in the Siddur?
I'm not really sure. I'll have to look into it before I send out this email. Mirz Hashem. All right, Yasher Koach, everybody.